First of all, guys, amazing chapter. We will discuss everything in the chapter, or a lot of it, in the next video when I'm talking about Zoro for other reasons. But you guys will see, don't even worry about that. But we will talk about chapter 1152 in the beginning a little bit, because I want to center this video about the topic that you guys obviously know what it's about. So turn on notifications, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The chapter starts with the Rocks trying to bitch Loki and tell him to go get his pops. By his pops, obviously you guys should know, I mean Harold. He told him, yo, go get Harold, kid. Of course Loki wasn't having that, and he told him he's a weakling, and Rocks had to up it on Loki real quick and show him that he's not meant to play with. He also did that, from my understanding, so that Harold could come back and check on his son, so that Rocks can meet with Harold. But the most important part of the situation that pertains to the title of this video is the dialogue regarding xebec's attacks he used on Loki. Rock's swordsmanship was renowned for its brutal impact, akin to a giant hammer and cannon fire. It was said to blow everything in its vicinity. So I made a video a while back talking about what the fuck does it even mean when people say Mihawk is just more skilled than Shanks. But to keep it simple, people just mean he's a better swordsman than Shanks. He has better swordsmanship than Shanks, but he's not stronger. Because apparently just flicking your wrist in fancy ways with your sword and doing precise slices is what people consider swordsmanship. So Shanks could be stronger in other ways, like being a hockey man and having hockey Susanos and shit. And I spent the entire video explaining how swordsmanship can be multiple things, and everyone has their own type of swordsmanship, and also being the world's strongest swordsman is also about being extremely strong in other departments as well, that people believe is what separates themselves from being a pure swordsman or whatever. And what I mean by that is that Mihawk being the world's strongest swordsman, you have to be the world's strongest swordsman with some of the best hockey or the best hockey in the series. But some people will tell you, oh, having crazy amount of hockey and you use hockey a lot with your sword, it doesn't make you a pure swordsman, whatever the fuck that means. I also spoke about how a swordsman doing quote-unquote non-swordsman-like things with a sword doesn't make them any less of a swordsman than someone like Mihawk. So now what I find hilarious, I never thought there was any evidence, but now this chapter pretty much should stop all the arguments, or specifically this one at least. There's actually no argument for someone to try to explain to me that Shanks is stronger than Mihawk without coming off a bit disingenuous. And I know that's kind of fucked saying that, because everybody has their own opinion and I can't just call someone disingenuous for having an opinion I don't agree with. But if I can see why someone believes something but I don't necessarily agree with it, doesn't mean their opinion's bad or they're being disingenuous. But with this scenario, there's literally no argument to be made, because at the end of the day we're debating something that's stated, which I don't understand. So let's talk about some of the arguments that can't work no more. The first one being Shanks not being a swordsman, which has been debunked a million times. There's a whole cover page made by Oda showing swordsman, so he's confirmed one regardless of whether you think it or not. Shanks used to have legendary sword duels with Mihawk. Okay, so those duels were so crazy. Wait, sword duels? That must mean he is a really good sword fighter. Might be a swordsman. And every altercation we see in Shanks, he's using his sword to do some shit, to fight or to flex on people, to stop someone, so I don't understand. So to say he's not a swordsman because, oh, King isn't a swordsman and he has a sword, that you can think whatever you want for guys like King, but just that's not the case with Shanks. So that's very disingenuous, that argument right there. And saying Shanks is shockwaves, meaning he's not a swordsman or he's not using swordsmanship when fighting, also doesn't make sense, but I'll get more into that. Also trying to discredit his title by trying to apply the logic of misleading titles from other characters to say Mihawk's isn't concrete isn't an argument that works either. Whitebeard wasn't the world's strongest man at Marineford, so this is what people typically say. Whitebeard wasn't the world's strongest man at Marineford, so titles aren't concrete. Oh, Kaido wasn't the world's strongest creature, even though I don't agree with that whole Whitebeard stuff, him with his title or whatever. Some people even want to talk about Kaido's title, but I don't really care at the end of the day, no matter how you see it. And I believe you guys should adopt this opinion as well, because those titles aren't held to the same weight as Mihawk's, simply because we know Mihawk's title is reliant on our main character's dream. So for Mihawk to be a fraud would mean Zoro's dream would be fraudulent. So just from that perspective, fuck everything else, fuck whatever like the pieces you're trying to add up to make those guys look like the title don't make sense. From that perspective, it wouldn't make sense to question Mihawk's title, unless you think Zoro achieving his dream will be meaningless, and I don't think that's something Oda would do. Speaking about fraud, there's gonna be people in the comments talking about Vista. That right there is not something anybody should entertain, and I'm definitely not gonna be entertaining that. If you want to think that's the peak of Mihawk, go ahead, brother. Oh, and the whole Shanks and Luffy end goal fiasco, I never really agreed with this when I made several videos on this. It kind of starting to not even make sense anymore, guys. When you got guys like Emu and Blackbeard existing, especially this chapter after seeing rocks and knowing Blackbeard's going to surpass that and be like the worst enemy for Luffy as a pirates, and just those guys are Luffy's real test of strength, so they get the upskill, like not Shanks. And the most common argument used these days to keep this afloat was people saying Mihawk has better swordsmanship than Shanks, but Shanks is more powerful. Or better yet, Shanks isn't even a swordsman since he doesn't use traditional swordsmanship and he's Haki orientated. So Rox's chapter having his swordsmanship being said to blow stuff away. It's known for its cannon fire type swordsmanship and a giant hammer like impact. It's like a quake, it's like a shock, it's like an explosion, his swordsmanship. If he does that and it's considered swordsmanship, then Shanks using straight Haki and doing whatever the fuck he wants with it, it's considered swordsmanship, and it doesn't make Shanks any less of a swordsman than someone like Mihawk or someone like Zoro. The whole argument of trying to depict what a swordsman is supposed to do or not supposed to do with their sword to make them not qualify for Mihawk's title just doesn't make any sense. If you identify as a swordsman and using it as your main fighting style, then whatever the fuck you do with it is considered swordsmanship, and you are included under the world's strongest swordsman title. Even Zoro acknowledges that when he says he will not lose to someone who calls himself a swordsman, and fucking Kabaji was using so many quote-unquote non-swordsman-like behavior abilities in his swordsmanship because he's a swordsman. So I'm gonna touch upon this very quickly, and I'm glad I seen this before I ended this video because there was really no way to get out of this debate for people who think Shanks is stronger than Mihawk, but guys like Brago, a very big YouTuber, gave these guys leeway and had them thinking they can still cling on to something. So Brago is still trying to say that this chapter proved that Oda is separating Haki from swordsmanship. Why did Oda even make the distinction of Mihawk having better swordsmanship than Shanks or more skill than Shanks? What I find funny about that panel is that why do people rate it in such a weird way? Oda was hyping up Mihawk, showing his bounty, and then saying he has more sword skill, better sword skill than Shanks, and then he tells the audience once again he's a world's strongest swordsman. So it's kind of like he's a world's strongest swordsman because of his sword skill, and that's kind of like the whole point here. Sword skill or swordsmanship is what makes you stronger than the other person. You guys can't sit here and try to define and make your own distinctions that were never made in the story. You guys cannot actually come up here and tell me what this skill is. You guys want to say there's a distinction. There's a distinction. Haki man. Guys who use Haki in different ways are different type of swordsmen, which you're allowed to be, by the way. You're allowed to be different type of swordsman, but you're still a swordsman. That still classifies under Mihawk's title. But it's funny because you guys try to say the guys that strictly use Haki specifically are the ones that are a different type of swordsman that don't classify under Mihawk's title because they use too much Haki and not technique. When the Scabbards use their Paradise Totsuka or use their two-sword style and mimic Odin's technique, by the way, this is the same technique that Odin emphasized Ryo, Haki, in order for them to use it. These are the same guys that mimicked Odin's technique but weren't able to do shit to Kaido. And Kaido even says their swordsmanship is nothing like Odin's. So what part of the swordsmanship did they lack, guys? What part? Oh, they lacked the power. They lack the Haki, because you know Odin was using Advanced Conqueror's Haki that the Scabbards didn't have, but hey, they still used the swordsmanship technique. So it's kind of like, how does that even make sense? You're trying to separate Haki or swordsmanship. Well, when we see our actual representation, aka Zoro, as what a swordsman or what a pure swordsman who just uses skill should be, because he's chasing the guy that we say only has skill over Shanks. He's chasing to become that guy and even stronger than him. Why does this guy display attacks like Pound Cannon, which are set to mimic a cannon, and Oda's using formulas and calculations and basing this attack off his strength to make it feel like a cannon is firing at you, similar to how fucking Rocks does it? And why does he also make tornadoes, which you guys would all classify as separating Haki from swordsmanship? Why the hell does Zoro focus on so much Haki? Why the hell is he so strong because of Haki? He's not strong because of the sword skill, because the sword skill doesn't fucking exist, because the sword skill that you guys keep saying separates itself from Haki isn't actually defined and isn't actually there. Swordsmanship skill is whatever the fuck Zoro does. And is what Zoro does any different from your Haki man? Like, he's a Haki man himself. The only distinction you could try to make is the swordsmen that fucking use bear crazy, gravity, fucking all this type of shit in their swordsmanship. And they're not Haki oriented, but they do a lot of other fuckery and use other abilities. But at the end of the day, like in the show and even with Zoro, it proves that those guys are all considered swordsmen in his eye and he won't lose to them. But specifically with the Haki man swordsmen, the swordsmen that you know use Haki, there is no distinction made. They all use Haki to strengthen their sword fights. That's the most integral part of swordsmanship. So there's no one guy who uses Haki differently makes him less of a swordsman than another guy who uses Haki in a different way. Like, they all use fucking Haki. When people say a guy has better swordsmanship or has more skill, skill is defined as what we see. And what do you guys see? What have you guys been told other than a whole lot of fuck ton of Haki coming off Zoro? And it wasn't the skill of the Scabbards that actually hurt Kaido. It was the Haki of Odin, showing you that hey, this swordsman Odin and his peers that are samurai swordsmen, they can copy a technique. The technique or the swordsmanship skill is now what actually defines the technique. It's the power behind it. So you can't separate that from swordsmanship because it's the most important part of it. So there's really no distinction.